Uh, Ted Rall, you talked about maybe some editorial cartoons don't have enough of a punch to them. I think Zapparo's probably getting him the world record defamation lawsuit, at least from national figures, probably could be characterized as one of those that has a lot of punch.
I am so jealous of Zapiro's lawsuit. President Zuma has awarded him essentially an international Pulitzer Prize. No editorial cartoonist could wish for anything more.
You have Ted. You have written and you are also a correspondent, and some of your cartoons were actually based on your own travels and reporting in Afghanistan and Iraq. Is that the case?
Afghanistan. I have not yet been to Iraq.
What does the average citizen think about Afghanistan after looking at a Ted Rall cartoon?
Well, I can't say what they think. All I can say is what I think and what I'm trying to convey to them. I'm trying to explain to the American people how things look on the ground in Afghanistan, which is very different from what most Americans, whether they are in favor of the war or opposed to it, really see. They don't really have an idea of what we are doing over there. And I was trying to convey that in the work that I filed from there last summer.
And you had a recent cartoon on Libya that we looked at, in which you recalled the Mujahideen.
That's right. I mean, obviously, as the news comes out of Benghazi and eastern Libya that there is an Islamist component to the anti-Gaddafi resistance and insurgency, I can't help but think of the U.S. experience in the 1980s where we armed the Mujahideen and we didn't know much about them. And obviously there's been some blowback in the form of 9/11 and other things. And it's crazy that the United States is going to war on the side of combatants that most Americans, including the Secretary of State herself, admit that they don't know anything about. I mean, this is one side in a civil war that is unidentified by ideology or religion or otherwise. We really don't know anything about them, but we want to send these guys weapons.
And is this the same? Have you commented on this at all as well, Ann?
Afghanistan?
About Afghanistan, no, and also the new Libyan, what we're calling the non-war.
Oh yes. My last information, I think, was about the Libyan conflict. Yes, I have.
Yes, and we don't have that one here, but could you tell us what that looked at?
I did. President Obama, he was rehearsing for his speech about Libya, and so I went back and found a part of the speech that former President Bush gave during the famous Mission Accomplished appearance.
Ah.
I basically had Obama. I used the actual audio from Bush and had Obama speaking those words.
All of the nons that he's that have been quoted.
Right.
Right. I actually saw that on your website last night. That's a brilliant one. That's a brilliant one. While we're talking about what's going around the world, Marcus or Rachel, you've had some things to say about the Libya, Gaddafi, and Japan. Could you tell us? We've been showing a couple of your cartoons related to that.
Yeah, the very bloody one was Walt was already looking or focusing Japan, and he was conquering his country back and mistreating his people very much at the same time, and nobody looked at him anymore.
Right.
So this was a very complicated, very cruel situation.
And you have him winning the Oscar for best talent for the best tyrant in the world. A very close competition as well. And you picture him with a bloody sword, a bloody scimitar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
While the world is watching Japan's crisis. Well, I think now we're watching both. Zapparo, tell me what the South African opinion is of these two issues, particularly of Libya.
Sorry, and I missed something for a second there. What was the second issue that you were asking about?
Yes. Are you reacting at all to in South Africa to the world news in Libya and in Japan?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, for sure. In terms of the Libya thing, I mean, I think I did one cartoon that was I just thought it was really simple, but I got a huge response from it. It was when the no-fly zone was actually about to come into effect. I think that's one of the cartoons that you got sent.
Yes.
I just did this.
We're looking at it right now.
Yeah, you have that one. Yeah.
Yes.
The fly swatter. It drew a lot of response, and was just a kind of a gut feel thing about Gaddafi and all that. It didn't really get into the nuance now of how complicated the responses have been, and I've got a couple of cartoons in the making about that. But one thing I'll say is that South Africa, true to form, as it has been doing over the past few years, is all over the place on foreign policy. I'm sure, a lot of other countries are as well. But there's a lot of backtracking going on, where initially Jacob Zuma supported the no-fly zone, but then kind of pulled back when he saw some of the bombing, and then did a few flip-flops. So I've got those kind of cartoons in the making as well. Japan, there've been people here who've somehow managed to construe it as an endorsement of nuclear power, because the tsunami was worse than anything that any nuclear power station has ever had to withstand, and they said it could have been worse. I'm serious. That's the kind of I'm sure we're all seeing those pro-nuclear people doing their spin. But I have sort of tackled that as well.
Yes, we're looking at one right now of the globe with a anti-radiation mask over there over its face, and it's labeled "Nuclear Rethink," and the globe is looking very worried, and as it obviously should be. I'd love to spend a lot of time talking about these specific cartoons, but I'd really like to hear more about your philosophy as a cartoonist. Do you try? First of all, why are you doing this? And secondly, what do you want people to do when they look at your cartoon? Let's start with Ted Rall.
I hope people think about things in a new way. I don't really think that I can convert people over to my politics. No right-winger is going to become a left-winger from reading my cartoon. But I do hope to open some dialogue and create the space for discussions that don't otherwise occur in media. That's really my goal.
And why do you do this?
Well, I've always admired the wild and free format of cartooning. I mean, here's something that you don't need a degree to do. You don't need any special qualifications to do. Even a kid can do it. And yet, not anybody can just do it. It's incredibly complicated and difficult, and nobody's ever drawn a perfect cartoon. So the challenge is endless. You always start out with the potential of that big piece of paper, and you know it's up to you to make it as good as you can, and you know that you'll always fall short some way. And so it's kind of intoxicating.
And do you agree with Ted? What would you add to the question about motivation and message?
No, I do agree with Ted. I I'm not going to change anybody's mind, but I want to offer, another way of looking at things, maybe another possibility. I actually came to editorial cartooning quite late. I was almost 6 years old. I had been an animator before, as well as graphic design. But there were a couple of events that happened that I think started my interest in politics, and I wanted to become more involved in the discussion. The Tiananmen Square massacre was the first one, and then I started watching more political shows, and you might remember in the early 1980s, the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill hearing.
Oh, yes.
In court. Yeah. And at that point, I decided I was going to put together a portfolio of editorial cartoons, and I sent them out, and that's how.
And the story is a very great success from there. We're running out of time here, so Marcus, let me ask either Marcus or Rachel to answer that question. Why do you do this?
Why do I do what?
Why do you do editorial cartoons? In its simple question there.
Yeah, I've been interested in history and politics from very, very early kindhood on. So it's a kind of react on politicians or on political injustice. You can react, and the politicians notice it. They do notice it, and of course, normally bad politicians don't have much humor, so you can offend them, of course, and perhaps you can correct some things going wrong, and of course, people is noticing in that speech. Nearly everybody can follow what's going on.
Good. Marcus, I'm going to have to cut you off here and to give Zapparo a bit of a moment about his motivation.
My motivation started in the apartheid era, and I was always interested in comics and cartoons generally, but not necessarily political cartoons. But when I became an activist, and that was prompted by being conscripted against my will into the apartheid army and refusing to carry arms and becoming a bit of a troublemaker in the army, I suddenly realized that cartooning was a fantastic way to express myself, politically. And then, the cartooning interest and the politics and activism came together, and I got into trouble with the old regime. And I must say, I didn't expect to get into as much trouble with the new order as I have.
And we wish you great luck, and we'll pay attention to that suit. We're going to have to go right to the credits here because we've had such a delightful conversation. I want to thank our guests from Vienna, Washington, San Francisco, and Cape Town. Our director is Travis McMillan. Audio by Pat Akers. The lead producer for today's show is Courtney Flatt. Our video producer is Tim Wall. Rebecca Wolfson is executive producer. The other producers of Global Journalists are David Cawthon, Ryan Kress, and Jessica Popovic. Stephanie Tabor is the production assistant. This is Byron Scott for Global Journalists, reminding you that you can download this show plus additional features at globaljournalist.org.